In addition to the mail and calendar apps we've just seen, there are some default Thunderbird apps. You'll find those apps on the second page. Now at the top, you have the network strength. So I want to make sure you're connected to Wi-Fi before using these apps. So on the second page, you'll find Self-Service, FT, My Thunderbird, and TLE. The first app we'll look at is the Financial Times, the FT app. It's a web app. The first time you bring it up, it's going to ask you a few questions. You're going to say OK for the first one and increase for the second. Essentially, it's increasing the cache size so that it can cache some of the newspapers as it gets downloaded. This particular newspaper can be subscribed to at the student rate, actually at the Financial Times website. And that's the Financial Times newspaper. I'm going to hit the home button and go to the next app, which is My Thunderbird. Another web app requires your ID and password from Thunderbird. So this is your portal login ID and password. Log in. You'll find links to other Thunderbird sites. Like for instance, if you want to find out your grades, it also has a link to your email. You'll find discussion groups, etc. here. This is one of two main sites that you'll use as a student. Now if I hit the home screen button again, the next app we'll go to is Thunderbird TLE. Now TLE stands for the Learning Environment. This is where you get all your class information. On the left-hand side, you're going to find all links to your classes. I can actually hit the All Classes button and then get a link, a list of classes that I could go to directly. This is where you will find your course packs. This is where you will find your Word documents, etc. Those are two very important Thunderbird sites. In addition to that, there's a self-service application. That self-service app is essentially a link to those apps in the App Store that Thunderbird recommends. You can get them directly from the App Store, but this allows you to find them a lot easier than searching through 475,000 apps. All of these apps are free. You can choose to install them or not. Some you will require. One of them is Tegrity Mobile. So you're going to choose that. It brings you to the App Store. And then you're going to say free, which is basically install. It's going to ask you for your existing Apple ID or create a new Apple ID. You should have already created an Apple ID in a previous section of this particular video, but you can create one here as well. You do need an Apple ID in order to download even free apps. So put in your Apple ID and password and then tap on OK. Sometimes you'll be asked for credit card verification information. If you are, click on Continue, fill in the required information, like in this case a security code. When you've filled in the required information, tap on Done, and then you'll get a message saying you're now able to download the original content. Now for the first time, you'll have to tap on Install again, actually start the install process. Now the app will be installed. You can move it wherever you want afterwards. We're going to go back into the self-service app and install the next very important app, which is called Xanadu. On the bottom of all the list of apps, you'll find the Xanadu app, and that app is for reading PDFs that have been encrypted. Those are your course packs. Very important to get this one early so that you have your reading. So click on Install, and it'll install that without having to ask for your Apple ID again. Now it's recommend that you go through self-service and install pretty much all these apps. It won't take too long, especially after you've logged in once. And I'll have different sessions on how you use some of these other apps. For instance, here's one of them called Evernote, which is great for note taking, and it stores all your notes in the cloud. So I'm going to install that particular app too. Once I have all these apps downloaded and installed, I can move them around in the groups that I want so I can be organized. Or, like I said, you could have up to 11 pages of app icons. Back into self-service, choose another app. In this case, Kindle, because there's going to be a Kindle book that we're going to have for one of the classes. So we'll download the Kindle app. All these are all free, as I said. Okay, choose another app in self-service. In this case, news. There's lots of different news ones that are there. Associated Press. Choose that one. Go back into self-service. Notice it can be pretty quick. And pick the next apps that you need. iBooks. Apple also sells books like Amazon does as well. So we're going to download that free app. So it's back and forth with the self-service application to choose different apps. In this case, The Economist. So we pick The Economist and another app, free download, install, and so on. So it's pretty self-explanatory on how to do the rest. As you can see, some of the apps take a little bit longer to install, and you can see it loading. It really depends on the speed of your network. Now I'm going to start organizing the apps. So I'm going to press and hold, and this time I'm going to move an app on top of another one, creates a group. It automatically named it Education. I'm going to start pulling some of the app icons into that group just by press and hold and move. You can have it organized any way you want. I'm just showing you one particular example, of course. I'm just moving them all into one, and I can change the name of the group from different from Education. So I'm going to move that group to the first page. I'm going to go back to the second page. I'm going to move, say, The Economist to the first page. And I'm going to drop that as well. And move iBooks to the first page. And if I hit the home button, they'll stop wiggling and everything's organized the way I want it. Now at this point, I can open the group. I can find the self-service application again, and I can start downloading other things. Doesn't really matter whether self-service app exists. As long as you run it, you can install all these apps. As I said previously, you can install apps from the App Store too. This just makes it easier to find them. Now you want to back up all the work you've just done on your iPad by plugging your iPad into iTunes. Now with iTunes, you're going to be able to do backup of your files as well as syncing any content you purchased from the App Store or from iTunes. Now it's required today for you to plug in physically into iTunes. In the future, with iCloud, you won't need an actual connection to iTunes to back things up. iTunes can be used on either a PC or a Mac and can be downloaded free from apple.com. Now there's three things you want to do on iTunes: backup, sync, and authorize your computer. The first step is authorize through the store menu. And you want to authorize your computer for your Apple ID that you created previously. Now if you haven't created an Apple ID, they're going to give you the opportunity to actually do that, and I'll talk about how that's going to work in a sec. But if you have one, go down to Store, authorize this computer, type in your Apple ID. Specifically, this is going to be the one that you've been using to download all those applications using the self-service app. You want to make sure it's the same Apple ID. And then you would say authorize. Now by default, your Apple ID has the ability of being authorized up to 5 computers. So I've currently authorized this computer. I've authorized 4 out of 5 available computers. So I'll say thank you very much. Now the next thing you probably want to do is change the name of your device. So here is IT Thunderbird's iPad. That's what everyone's going to show up with that same name. I'm going to click on that name and I'm going to change it to be my own, Sean's Thunderbird. Now you can name it whatever you want. Okay, so there's changing the name. The next thing you're going to do is register your iPad with your own information. So you'll say continue. It'll ask you which Apple ID do you want to use to register your iPad. Use the same one that you just authorized. Type that information here and there. Now for whatever reason you didn't do the self-service part yet and you haven't got any apps on your iPad, then you can create a free Apple ID right there, okay, if you don't have one. If you do already have one, okay, I would put it in use my current Apple ID. And in most cases, most people will already have their Apple ID. The computer's authorized with it. You've already downloaded apps onto the iPad. So type in that and log in. So I'm going to cancel because I don't want to specifically, well, let me show you what it looks like. So I'm going to put my information in, the same one I just used to authorize, and I will continue. It's going to pull up my information. It's going to have the serial number of the iPad, and I'm going to submit. But in my case, I'm not going to associate me with that particular iPad because this will go to a student. So I'm going to cancel, and everyone will see the same screen. Now, there's two important things from this point. So we've done the first one, which is authorizing your computer. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to back up your configuration and any files like course packs. So you're going to right click on where the device name is and you're going to say backup. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to right click, and this is very important. You're going to transfer purchases from that iPad. Now that includes free apps as well. For those people that have actually purchased something and it's sitting on their iPad, you would have got a message at the very beginning of plugging it in that says you have purchased apps on your iPad. Would you like to transfer them to iTunes? And you could have said yes there as well. If you said no at that point, just come here, say transfer purchases from whatever your iPad name is, and it's going to copy all of the apps that we currently have into your iTunes. You only have to do this once. Every time after the fact that we finally sync, you're going to get essentially the same apps on your computer and on the iPad. It's just the first time. Okay. Once we have both the backup and the transfer of purchases, we're going to go to apps and we're going to say to sync apps. Now it's going to warn you that it's going to remove all of the apps on your current iPad, which is totally fine. This is one annoying thing about iTunes. You can only sync with one iTunes at a time. So this will only happen the very first time. So I'm going to say yes, sync apps, and only say sync apps if you did the transfer purchases previously. So I'm going to say sync apps, and I'm going to choose all of the apps that I had previously shown you how to download to make sure that they were there. I'm also going to choose automatically sync new apps. At this point, I could actually go to the different pages, and from here I'm actually able to move things around and create groups, etc. So I can do the same thing through iTunes that I showed you on the iPad. I'm not going to do that now, but I'm just going to apply, and it's going to sync. And essentially it's going to look exactly the same way it was before. So if you were to look at the iPad, it still has the same apps, it has all the same data, it's done the same thing. So from this point on, this is when you can personalize it based on your own iTunes. Now you may or may not have a MobileMe account. Everyone will have an iCloud account in the fall, which will be your Apple ID. What those things are their accounts to allow you to sync things like calendars and contacts, as well as mail items and bookmarks, for instance, with the cloud. Now, if you look at your info tab at the top for your particular iPad, you're going to see you have options to sync your address book, sync your calendars, sync your mail accounts, and anything else you might have like bookmarks or notes. Now from this point on in your iTunes, you can actually use iTunes to manage your iPad content, or you can do it through your iPad. So for instance, if you want to download any of the apps, you want to find apps, you want to find iBooks, you can do it through iTunes. So I can go over to apps to see what I currently have, and I can go essentially to the iTunes store. You'll notice that's where I get music, movies, TV show. The App Store, when I do this, if I choose iPad, I'm able to choose these apps, and with my Apple ID, either download the free ones or purchase other apps. So you can find a number of apps here. Now there is an app called the App Store on the iPad, and you can do exactly the same thing there. If you buy it on iTunes, or if you buy it on the iPad, make sure you come back, plug in your iPad physically for now, and make sure you say sync every once in a while. As I said, sync does two things. It backs up your configuration and files, but it also synchronizes things like music, movies, TV shows, and apps that you purchased on iTunes or you purchased on the iPad. It makes sure they're on both places. So if you ever lose your iPad, you're able to actually plug in a new one and restore exactly what you had before from your iTunes.